Clean coal seems to be a contradiction in terms. Within the walls of the coal research laboratories at Maitland, they're pioneering Auscoal, ultra-clean coal. What is clean coal? Well, it's coal which has been chemically leached with caustic soda and washed in acid. The result? All the minerals are taken out.
It's very simple chemistry. It's just a matter of removing the minerals out of the coal, ending up with two value-added materials.
The extracted minerals can then be used for a range of things, from the building industry right through to phosphate-free soap. The clean coal is a substitute for petroleum-based materials that can be used in boilers and furnaces, for example. Of course, the more money you plough into producing a better product, the more that product's going to cost.
We talk very roughly in terms of doubling the coal cost, but producing a material that's half the cost of a petroleum equivalent.
Environmental benefits? Clean coal generates less carbon dioxide. This pilot plant at Maitland cost around $3 million. Plans are in the pipeline for a larger plant, generating 100,000 tonnes of ultra-clean coal each year. Anthony Griffiths, NBN News.
Against some teams this season, the Knights have opened brilliantly only to throw it away when holding a handy lead. But it was the reverse at Campbelltown with the Magpies getting the jump.
We didn't start the game all that well, and unfortunately West did get a really good start, which every team hopes to obtain. Though I think from memory they got about 4 sets of 6 on us, and which led to their first try, and we just seemed to be on the back foot from there.
The Knights hit back late in the game with an 8-point try to Tony Herman after he did well to regather, and Schuster's 2 successful attempts left them 2 points shy of West's. And with only 1 win in your last 6 outings, you could be forgiven for being a little despondent.
Everybody certainly knows what's ahead of us. As we spoke earlier, 8 wins I think is going to be required from the next 11 games. So everybody's just got to put the head down and bum up, so to speak.
Boyd is one of the quiet achievers with the BP Knights, called up to the front row to fill the gap left by Paul Harrigan, and although he'd be happier in the second row, he hasn't let anyone down with his rock-solid performances in the number 10.
A phrase that I had, if I ever played front row, I'd give the game away, but not so. With Paul obviously being in the Australian side and the state sides, as long as I'm playing first grade, I know it's an old cliche, but as long as I'm there, I'll play anyway.
There were very few empty seats left in the auditorium of Morey's Services Club for last night's meeting, except for those unfilled by past and present politicians. Despite being on different sides of the political arena, the anti-gun law lobby sees similarities in the 1988 push by the Unsworth Labor government and the current Liberal Greiner government in introducing tough gun legislation.
This legislation does entail registration of firearms, and secondly, that the government has now written it into the law that it is part of the law of New South Wales that you are not able to have a firearm for self-protection, protection of family or protection of property.
Mr Turner says New South Wales laws will serve as a model for the rest of Australia.
I would say the politicians throughout Australia are going to realise that the Australian people do not take lightly the move by the government to totally disarm them. And by the way, that is the concept of being disarmed as an Australian population is now not being said by me, but you might recall it was said by Mr Pickering last week when he drew the people's attention to a document from the federal government saying that it is expected that within the next 10 years there will be no private firearm ownership in Australia.
However, Police Minister Ted Pickering has today responded to many of the same concerns which were raised at a meeting in Glen Innes last week. He says under no circumstances does the state government have a secret agenda to ban all firearms. Local member Ray Chappell added that for those who have questions surrounding the new gun laws, recorded information is now available on a toll-free phone number. It is 008 805 156.
The museum has brought out its collection of Whiteley's works, giving them pride of place. The controversial artist, who was found dead in a motel room near Wollongong on Monday night, is held in high regard throughout the art world, and Armidale is no exception.
He was, I guess, almost the epitome of what artists really should be, or the way that we envisage the way they should be.
The Armidale works are considered to be important as they include a self-portrait of Whiteley done in the 70s, as well as a portrait of Francis Bacon, an artist Whiteley admired. Whiteley's works will remain on display for the next 2 weeks, with Director of the museum, Joe Innersberg, hoping the public will take advantage of the opportunity.
We felt that we could pay some sort of respect, almost like hanging a flag at half-mast, by going to our collection and bringing out 3 works by Brett Whiteley.
According to the New South Wales Cancer Council, 1 in 14 Australian women will develop breast cancer. For its victims, the diagnosis, the most chilling event.
I think their initial reaction is that cancer means death, that their life is at an end.
To help, cancer support services were set up throughout the state in the early 70s. The Newcastle branch has 7 volunteers, and today 8 new recruits were put through their paces. The role of volunteers, who themselves have all had breast cancer treatment, is to give support and advice to the patient, both in hospital and at home. The common experience, Robin Wicks says, is vital to the patient's own adjustment.
To see that women have got back to their normal lifestyle, that they're well, that it's not the end of their life, and to be able to meet someone who's been through all this and has come out on the other side, it can be very reassuring for them.
It's hoped with the new recruits, the service will be extended to women throughout the Hunter region. Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
Interpol, International Police Organisation, says that Australia is the 4th highest country in the world for sexual assault.
One of the main contributors, Mr Sonneman says, is child abuse. According to Australian police statistics, 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 5 boys will experience sexual abuse by the time they reach the age of 13. And Mr Sonneman believes the incidence is increasing.
Police will tell you about younger and younger and younger age children sexually assaulting each other. It's no longer the adults with the children, it's now happening amongst children because they find it in the smut magazines and they do what children are taught to do, which is to imitate adult behaviour.
A major cause, Mr Sonneman claims, is the availability of pornographic material in the general marketplace. He's especially concerned about children viewing it in public displays and growing up thinking what's advertised is acceptable behaviour. Mr Sonneman isn't pushing for the removal of such material, but what he does want is to see legislation passed which prevents the display or sale of it to children. Mr Sonneman is trying to increase community awareness about child abuse because he believes only through public pressure will changes occur. Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
Phone books, yum, yum. Old phone books, delicious.
The Batmobile screamed into Hollywood today for the premiere of the $60 million sequel to the 1989 blockbuster. This time, Michael Keaton was taking on not the villains, but the fans. It's Keaton's second venture into Gotham City in a role he says never bores him. Just a whisker behind, arch-enemy Catwoman, casually disguised as actress Michelle Pfeiffer. Danny DeVito was also there, minus the silicone stomach he strapped on to play the movie's other baddie, the Penguin. At the hottest premiere of the year, everybody was there to see and be seen. Batman returns in Australia on Friday and should top the original earnings of around $300 million. A perfect way to earn a living.
Schools are increasingly becoming think tanks for environmental concerns, and it was Newcastle's Youth Mayor Michelle Campbell who presented 3 students with their awards from federal MPs Alan Morris and Ros Kelly. Tim Spencer looked at the disposal of sewage sludge at Burwood Beach.
With the ocean, I think it's probably the best idea, but it's too expensive to pump it out the back, and down the mines, that's where all the hard stuff has to go.
Jane Turner addressed an environment under threat at the Toronto wetlands.
There was a road that they were thinking about putting through the wetlands, which I thought was a pretty big issue, pretty important for Toronto's welfare.
Stephen Perry looked at cleaning up the coast in the Glenrock State Recreation Area.
From the study, I found after about 6-month period, the weeds have not grown back and the natural vegetation's taken over.
The crash brought out dozens of residents from their homes along Thomas and Dangar Street at about 3 o'clock. Ambulances called to the accident found there was little they could do. The elderly woman had died instantly. Accident investigation police believe she was turning left onto Thomas Street when the runaway compressor sliced through her vehicle. It's believed the compressor and trailer was being towed uphill on Thomas Street by a truck. It broke free without warning, slewing across the street and gathering speed. Police say the victim, believed to be from Cardiff, was alone in the car and had little chance of avoiding the oncoming trailer. Inquiries are continuing. It's the second death on the city's roads in a day. At 7:30 this morning, 70-year-old Doris Sullivan of Belmont North died in a road smash at Belmont. Witnesses told police her car was hit by an SRA truck as she was turning onto the Pacific Highway from Nataba Road. A 32-year-old male truck driver was treated for shock. It's understood the woman's husband was also treated after he walked to the accident scene from a nearby address. There are unlikely to be any charges arising from the incident. Tom Hilston, NBN News.
Until late this afternoon, the intersection of Alexandra Avenue and Vinden Street in Rutherford was closed to traffic. The reason? A fatal 2-car crash that happened just after 3 o'clock. A young man driving a yellow Commodore was travelling along Alexandra Avenue when the driver of a blue Falcon pulled out from Vinden Street. The Commodore ploughed into the passenger side of the Falcon, flipping the sedan onto its roof.
It was a real loud bang and smashing.
The middle-aged Falcon driver, whose name is yet to be released, was dead before the ambulance arrived. The other motorist was taken to Maitland Hospital with facial and other injuries. Police believe the deceased was on his way home and was only 2 doors away from where he lived when the accident happened. Police are still investigating the cause of the crash.
Speed may be a factor involved in this accident.
Scott Bevan, NBN News. While most of us love a sunburnt country, the downside is that every 10 years or so, Hunter residents have had to face droughts and water restrictions. But the Hunter Water Corporation hopes to beat the dry times by expanding the region's major supply source, Grahamstown Dam.
The decision has been that we will raise Grahamstown. We'll raise it in the first 2 stages, then we'll look at how we might raise it further down the track.
The 5-year program will increase Grahamstown's storage from 132,000 megalitres to more than 200,000. Mr Broad says that will serve the region's water needs until the year 2010. That prediction will be welcomed by farmers in the Dungog area who have been fighting plans for a dam at Tilligra that would have flooded their properties.
However, we can't rule out building a Tilligra or a Johnson's Creek sometime in the future.
An environmental impact statement is to be done before work begins, but Mr Broad concedes there is one minus with the project. About 6 properties will become flood prone.
As we raise the dam level, that means the water from the surrounding area doesn't get away as quickly as it would have in the past. So some properties will be subject to flooding more after this proposal than they would have now.
Work on the $32 million project is expected to begin early next year. Scott Bevan, NBN News.
Buses started coming off the road at 9:30 this morning. More than 200 drivers met to decide their future. They voted overwhelmingly to go back to the Industrial Relations Commission and demand that State Transit enter into a formal agreement. In what was considered a strange move, Dave Winwood voted against his own resolution.
I voted against it on principle. Old trade union principle. You never give the boss nothing.
The key points in the drivers' proposal: that drivers accept a half-hour increase on every shift, those not wanting to accept voluntary redundancy be retrained as operators, the introduction of part-time, temporary and casual positions, and payment for working public holidays.
The union package exceeds State Transit's demand by something in the order of $300,000, more than what they were asking. So if they don't want to settle on this deal, they don't want to settle.
They haven't really put anything of any substance to us in terms of cost savings, and whether they come up with it at the 11th hour, be interesting to note. But there's no, it is my clear preference that State Transit continues the services.
After the meeting, union representatives made a beeline for Sydney. Drivers voted to return to work this afternoon. Private companies had until 5 o'clock to express interest in the Newcastle routes. Anthony Griffiths, NBN News.
The time, 6 last night. Vales Point Power Station is shrouded in smoke.
We heard this huge big bang followed by 3 smaller bangs, and it sort of shook the foundations of the house and rattled the windows.
It was like a fireworks display of sparks we could see through the trees.
It's believed the fire started in an electrical transformer in the plant switchyard. It then spread to cables in nearby trenches and then into man-sized tunnels which stretched for kilometres under the station's A and B plants. Tunnels under A plant, decommissioned in '89, were engulfed, main switch rooms severely damaged. The battle to prevent it spreading to Section B. Hazardous materials units from Sydney and Newcastle were called in. By then, 100 firefighters were on the scene.
The fire was certainly quite serious and probably one of the worst fires that I've been involved with over the 29 years.
Specially clothed firefighters entered the tunnels, facing zero visibility and a toxic substance of hydrogen cyanide being given out by the fire. With the fire isolated in A plant, officers flooded tunnels with water and foam. Shortly before 7 this morning, the fire was officially out. Then the mopping up began. Plant management has praised the efforts of all involved and have launched a full inquiry into the fire's cause. The mopping up operation was wrapped up by late this afternoon. The last step is for a team of fire officers equipped with breathing apparatus to go back down into the tunnels to extinguish spot fires still burning. If that's not done, fire officers say a fire the magnitude of last night's outbreak could well erupt again. Catherine Lamond, NBN News. Just me, sort of get the thoughts together. They basically came in and went straight out the back.
John Denver's guitars were silent on the stage this afternoon, but tonight they'll be strummed to life, ringing out the chords to feel-good hits such as Country Roads and Calypso. Road crews were preparing for the concert, lifting towards the roof amplifiers that later will raise it. And once the music starts, the shell will be transformed into a sea of 5,000 people in a gala opening concert. Centre manager Kim Sharp says it's fitting that an international artist is opening the new venue.
It's the only one of its kind in regional Australia, and to have an international artist like John Denver open it is really the icing on the cake.
The official opening was to be a double act of sorts, Denver providing the music and Premier Nick Greiner the words. But after Friday's ICAC findings into the Metherill affair, Mr Greiner won't be taking to the stage. Instead, Education Minister Virginia Chadwick will tread the boards.
We haven't been told an official reason, but we assume that it's because of what's been happening over the last few days. He's obviously got a very busy schedule and just wasn't able to make it.
On a wet Townsend Oval, it was the Lions who roared early when Darren Ford put in a super grubber kick and it was chased down by Jason McPhail. He wasn't held and was able to get a basketball pass away onto Simon Cook for a 6-0 scoreline. But Lakes were in a dangerous mood and clever Craig Hibbard was the catalyst for their first try and the scorer. He set the play in motion on the blind and a series of keep the ball alives ended up with Hibbard and it was 6-all at the break. And then it was the Scott Carter show. Both the villain being warned a couple of times by the referee for over-vigorous play, Carter responded in attack. A clean break from dummy half, a specialty of the former Knights player, and Jeff Walters was on the receiving end and he touched down under the posts. Carter sealed the win for the Seagulls when pressing for the line, Lakes were again able to keep the ball in play, and as it shot along the back line, Carter was there to grab the pass and he scored near the uprights.
Grafton's new synthetic grass field was put to the test in what was a close game between Manning Valley in the gold and Far North Coast in blue. 15 minutes into the first half and Manning Valley broke through with a goal by Tony Farr. For Far North Coast, although they had a better run of the ball, scoring opportunities were squandered. In the second half, defence from both sides was tight, but with 5 minutes of the game remaining, it was this breakaway run, an eventual goal by Steve Parvin, that put victory beyond doubt for Manning Valley. Catherine Lamond, NBN News. Under grey skies, both sides came out with a sense of determination, solid defence the main feature of their play. It was a tryless first half, Wingham putting the only points on the board with a penalty goal. 7 minutes into the second half and running with the wind, the Sharks scored and converted to lead 6-2. Pushing the ball wider out to their backs, Port then added 2, taking the total to 16-2. The tally could possibly have been even higher if not for this knock-on right on the line. In other Group 3 games, Foster Tuncurry defeated Tari United.
When the Quins arrived at Glen Innes today aboard the air ambulance, they created quite a stir. They were born at Brisbane's Mater Hospital. By all accounts, preparations for their homecoming have been frantic. Sounds like it came as a bit of a surprise to Mum and Dad too. But it didn't take parents Adele and Ian Chapman Burgess long to get over the shock. They moved to another house and stocked up. Today, the Quins appeared to take it all in their stride, on their best behaviour for the assembled media. But looks can be deceiving. For brother Jack, though, all the attention was really quite boring.
To get the bow out from the...
Clicks in. Just gently, yep.
Traffic on the New England Highway was blocked for an hour and a half this morning as rescue officers cleared the scene of the crash. It happened around 8 a.m, 30 kilometres south of Armidale, between a northbound Honda Civic and a utility travelling south.
Vehicles have collided, appear to be head-on, with the damage predominantly to the offsides of both vehicles, and there is some indication that one vehicle may have crossed to the incorrect side of the roadway.
Both drivers were killed, Uralla Fire and rescue officers having to cut the bodies free. John Wilshire, 55 of Armidale, was driving the utility. The driver of the Honda was 23-year-old Graham Douglas Willis from Uralla. His female passenger, 19-year-old Cherie Hill from Inverell, was taken to Armidale and New England District Hospital in a critical condition, suffering serious pelvic and leg injuries. It's believed Cherie and Graham were on their way home from university in Wagga. Armidale Coroner and Uralla Police are investigating the cause of the accident. It's expected post-mortems will be carried out next week. And in Newcastle, a 65-year-old New Lambton man was killed on Mile Road, Cardiff, when this car in which he was driving veered onto the wrong side of the road, colliding with an oncoming car. Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
The two-day extravaganza attracted dealers and buyers from Queensland, Melbourne and the local area. Sometimes thought as dusty and dated, the antiques at this display looked as though they were this year's vintage. For those who have their own private collections, some handy hits were also on offer, with a special trick for making silver look like new. The exhibition left Moree late this afternoon, bound for Dubbo. To say the Taree girls ran into a bit of foul trouble is somewhat of an understatement. Maitland in black must have sniffed victory, down just 10 points with 2 minutes to go, facing just 3 opponents. But somehow the Taree girls held on when that final siren sounded. They'd hung on to win 83-73, and that win completed a fine day for Manning teams. The girls beat Gosford in both the under-14s and under-16s. The guys picked up the trifecta, beating Gosford in the under-14s, 16s and 18s. Matter of fact, Taree's under-18 men's team is undefeated after 7 rounds. While Taree celebrates, Maitland has to go through it all again tomorrow when it takes on Port Macquarie.
Ron Quinton on Dandy Stepper looks pretty confident and grabs the lead at the 200 mark. Dandy Stepper has drawn clear of On Kylie's run. Real Grit is getting home well from a long way back in the field, but the filly Dandy Stepper is clear. Look at Real Grit absolutely rocketing to the line. Dandy Stepper holding on and she'll win. Dandy Stepper at good odds beats Real Grit. Now third eye.
7-3 and 1 the placings. The Quinella paid $24. The trifecta $463.30.